advantage of the opportunity. But right now is about right now.
The Plan B, Ohio State Buckeyes!
Give everything you got in your heart to this place.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Rushing the Field, a national college football show from NBC Sports. I'm Nicole Auerbach, he's Joshua Perry. And JP, we are inching closer and closer to the actual season. Like, we have a preseason coaches poll to dissect, which we will a little bit later. But like, that's when you know quarterback battles are reaching the final stages. Unfortunately, there's also been some training camp injuries, but we're getting like day-to-day updates from these teams because they are practicing for the season, which is right around the corner.
I mean, it's poll season, it's update season, it is lie season. There are lies that are floating around social media, people creating these fake reports that players are injured, which is a dirty thing to do.
Yes.
It's absolutely insane, but this is also what we live for. It's why we're breathing. So I'm very excited that we are at this point right now, so close to football.
We are, and we're coming out of talking season, which of course is all the media days. So we have some interviews for you. We'll tack some on to the later part of today's show. We'll also do a special standalone episode with Joshua and my conversations from Big Ten Media Days. We got a lot of time with pretty much everyone in the conference. So we've got a bunch of coaches and player interviews. We'll hear from Nico Auerbach later in today's show and Matt Rule as well, because we are going to talk a little Nebraska when we get to our conversation about the preseason poll. Want to run through some news and notes. I was in Singapore last week. I was covering the swimming world championship. So we did not do an episode. So we're just going to kind of catch up on some other topics. I want to start with a story that's out this week in the Texas Monthly. It's a piece by S.C. Gwynn. Really good feature on Archie Manning, who he is, spent a lot of time with his family members. And they talked, Eli and Archie in particular, as well as Cooper, about kind of like what makes Arch who he is and how, his football journey has come about. Interesting quote, though. Archie Manning, Arch's grandpa, said that he hasn't talked to Arch about this, but that he does not expect him to declare early. Like, it's kind of like a warning shot here at the teams and the fan bases and everyone who wants to like tank for Arch next year, and have assumed, he just had this one great year starting at Texas and then will go pro. He said, quote, Arch isn't going to do that. He'll be at Texas. Joshua, do you buy it?
Absolutely not. No. And here's the reality of the situation, right? Like, I think I buy this a little bit more than other prospects who might do this, because we've talked about it. The inputs are there for Arch. Like, he was already from a wealthy background where maybe the urgency to leave early for the NFL didn't exist from a financial standpoint. And then you put the NIL and everything else with it. Like, he independently also has a ton of money. And he comes from a family that has spent a lot of time in the NFL, around NFL people, and they understand the idea of readiness and what it takes to actually be prepared for that league. And so if he gets to the end of the year and they feel like he's not ready, I'm not exactly sure they're going to be rushing to have him drafted into a situation where, maybe he's got to play too early. Maybe he's not being developed by a very good franchise. So I think this is a smokescreen, right? Like, he's going to be a good player. He's probably going to be gone. But there's also this idea in my mind where I think Archie believes exactly what he's saying right now, because they want to make sure that Arch is given the best opportunity to be successful when he goes to the league.
Let me throw a wrench, though. I didn't realize this because you and I are a little bit younger than some of our peers who covered, Peyton and Eli when they were in school. They did not leave early. Everyone thought that Peyton in particular that these guys were going to leave early, and they came back even that Peyton had already graduated. Do you think there's something
different
to that?
Day and age still? I get it. And again, this goes into the idea of this family has a better understanding than most of what it's going to take for Arch to be where he needs to be. It is really difficult for me if he ends up being the number 1, 2, or 3 quarterback in this class in particular, where people feel like there's some pretty good quarterbacks, that he wouldn't declare early.
We will see, because I think this is a really interesting subplot now. Having seen these comments, kind of read the way that the family talks, they're very much in the same boat as like when I was around Arch at SEC Media Days, and he was just saying like, I haven't earned anything yet. Like, stop kind of giving me or labeling me all of these.
I
like,
tend
I
to
barely
agree with
played.
that too.
So, I think that's part of it too, like actually
Sure.
getting the experience in college. So that's something that's, I think, really interesting as a subplot because, obviously there's always that backdrop of the draft and especially with the quarterbacks of like the draft order. So it'll be interesting to see like if this ultimately is a decision for him, or like you said, I mean, because so much of his college career has already been different from the way that college quarterbacks or 5-star quarterbacks operate today, like sitting for 2 years, not transferring. I mean, there are guys in his class that transferred twice already, and he hasn't even been the full-time starter yet. So everything's a little bit different. I think nothing is really out of the realm of possibilities with him, but I get what you're saying. And I think that becomes a very interesting storyline if he becomes part of the Heisman race, if he is one of the best quarterbacks in the country.
I think the other part too is like this is, I think, more of a message to teams who would be, who would consider tanking. You have to be a bad organization, just like fundamentally, in my opinion, to tank, to actually go out and actively try to lose football games to get a player. And there are a million reasons I feel this way. And one of the biggest ones is there are a whole bunch of guys who are already in that locker room that their clock is ticking, getting ready to expire. And you're hurting their careers just so you can go after a guy. And so maybe this is more of a message of like, listen, we're in control of Arch's process. And if you think that you're going to game the system, like, we can't be got. We are going to do this the way that we want to do this.
And this is also famously a family that has tried to stop where someone's getting drafted.
That they wanted to do things. Absolutely.
So yeah, it's a fun subplot. I like this kind of as a backdrop for the season. A couple other news notes, just because we've been covering this. We had the whole episode on a house settlement explainer. There was some sort of resolution on the collectives front. They are going to be allowed to do deals with athletes. So they won't be kind of banned like wholesale. But I mean, there's going to be elements, and we'll see how these are enforced about, what they're being paid. Is it similar to what that type of service is elsewhere? And like the dollar figures of these deals, like what are the actual requirements that go along with getting paid and the services rendered? So it's not the death of collectives as a whole, but I do think the ones that are going to continue to work mostly are the ones that are going to kind of serve as like a marketing agency and more so set the athlete up with a company versus, here's $2 million because the donors of the school like you as a recruit.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing because I think the reaction on social media when people saw that collectors were still allowed to do deals is the whole basically like, oh man, well, we shut our collective down and we could have just been giving kids money. And like, maybe you could have, I don't know, but it doesn't feel that simple to your point. Like, it feels like these collectives have to exist in a very different way. I keep coming back to this. So every time we have these conversations, like, do you think the bag man is already back? Like, you think there's a guy who's dropping money off in a McDonald's bag somewhere, like, putting the briefcase under the park bench? Like, do you think that is already back?
I don't know. I think there's an assumption, sure, that that's already back. But like I keep, and maybe this is just too optimistic, but I keep thinking these are all the same coaches and ADs and everyone who's been complaining that there weren't rules, that this stuff was unregulated, impossible to do roster management. So if you're already allowing that to happen, then it's just like, all right, well, what was the point? What was the point of trying to create rules and trying to create a system if you're immediately going to go around it, right? And I also think that there's, games of telephone that continue to happen of like, well, I heard this and this and this is happening. It's still only been a month into this new world, so we don't know for sure. But sure, I'm sure that could happen. Or, a collective pays somebody and they don't report the deal, right? Like that feels like the more likely outcome.
I mean,
but
which is basically the bag man, by the way.
Which is basically the bag man. It's just like just a different well-oiled machine.
He's a bag man wearing a suit.
Correct. And maybe just like, putting it into your direct deposit, right? Instead of like a handshake and some cash. So sure, that could absolutely be happening. And I'm sure you could always find someone who says that it is already, right? My thing is just like, I've heard so much whining and so much complaining for 4 years that if you're going to immediately start doing that, then I don't really have much patience for it. You asked for rules, you asked for a system. And I was talking to someone this week who was like, there's a lot of people who are just like frustrated by the whole thing. And they are hoping that the outcome is not, it's the same as it's always been. Plus now schools also have to pay $220 million a year on top of it. Right. So I think there is still like, there's fatigue, but there's maybe some optimism that like, if the deals do have to get approved and they have to be like realistic, if somebody gets like $10,000, for X services instead of 200,000, I think that's better. I think that reins in a lot of what we're talking about. But to your point, I mean, it has to be the stuff that's going through the system and gets approved. But I don't know. It's hard for me. I'm not going to have a lot of sympathy for people who are skirting the rules after they complain about not having rules.
I totally agree with that sentiment there. Like it was wild, but I also feel like coaches were begging for rules so they could know how to break them. Like that's how this sport has always gone, is where the line is and you want to get up as close to it as possible. And some people like stepping over it and some people step over it often. And I think the previous world that we were in, there was confusion because you just literally didn't know where the line was. Like it was hard to interpret rules. And I feel like the gray area and the lack of guidance is what really frustrated these people who are so used to having everything very clearly defined. So I don't think it was really ever about the rules or everybody playing by the same rules. I just think some guys were legitimately trying to figure out, okay, where is that line? And then, how are we going to do what we have done in the past, which is either get real close to it or step all the way over it.
Right. And so that part's always going to exist, that people are always going to try to find loopholes or position themselves the best. I still do believe that what people are talking about, especially coaches are talking about right now, are going to be the keys moving forward. Retention and, talent development are going to be more important, I think, than they've been the last 4 years. But yeah, we kind of need to see how it's all going to shake out. And we're also kind of walking into the world of recruits being offered their rev share contracts right now. Like that's happening for the first time. They can have their offers. They can't sign them until signing day. But, we're kind of doing the first of all of these chapters.
That's a really interesting thing. Have you talked to anybody about what those offers look like? Is there a defined percentage or number that is in?
I think that was the assumption. Yeah. And so
because you're trying to figure out when you're
who's going to say yes. Yeah.
And how much you have to spend on the rest of your class as you go on. It's a really interesting thing.
Right. So I think we talked about this during our house settlement explainer. I mean, I think you're going to have to allow people to sign deals on the spot. Like you got to change that and just kind of have like a rolling signing period, because how can you kind of earmark money for 5 different guys not knowing if they're going to come? Maybe you only make the offer to guys that have like verbally committed or like you feel like really solid for. But like you can't change your mind. You can't have somebody pick a hat on signing day if you didn't allocate the money for them anymore. Like that doesn't work. So I think that's what's going to be really fascinating, how people do that. And then you are also still trying to allocate money for the portal window. So like everyone's kind of got to plan these things like years out, which is fascinating. So we're going to see. We're going to see what happens here. Last bit of news that we missed that we're catching up on. Really emotional moment from Deion Sanders, who opened up about his bladder cancer last week. He had been away from the team, was dealing with a health issue for a number of months. Everyone was kind of very tight-lipped about it. And he goes and gives a press conference with his doctors. Says that he had an aggressive cancerous tumor that was removed. His doctor said that, he's cured from that cancer. There's going to be ongoing effects. Like he said, he's going to add a porta potty on the sidelines, and was just like very open about, what it means to not really be able to control your bladder moving forward. And then he had a really great plea, I think, to all of us, just telling people to go to the doctors, telling people to get things checked out, because if he had waited, this could have been a lot worse. So let's hear a little bit from Deion Sanders at his news conference last week.
Get yourself checked out, especially African-American men. We don't like going to the doctors. We don't like nothing to do with a doctor. You know that. So I'm not just talking to the brothers. I'm talking to my Caucasian brothers, my Hispanic brothers, my Asian brothers, my everybody, and my sisters. And that's all y'all. get checked out, because it could have been a whole another gathering if I had. I'm thankful. It's been a tremendous journey. It's been tough. I think I dropped 25 pounds. I was like a Atlanta Falcon prime at one point. You know.
So he said that he chose to remove the bladder instead of undergoing weekly treatments for 3 years for cancer with a 50% recurrence rate. And, again, I think that it was just really, it kind of, I want to say like inspiring, but I know that's going to sound like a strange word to describe it, but I think like the openness and candor, it was really important. Like, I thought it was like a really moving press conference, and I genuinely think a lot of people really appreciated the honesty of him talking about like he's going to be wearing Depends, and just like all of the health challenges and what his life is going to look like, but being grateful that it does continue, that he will have the ability to do what he wants to do in so many spaces, including coaching, moving forward. So I just thought it was like this really powerful moment of Deion Sanders opening up about this. And I think, obviously, we're all going to be rooting for him and his health, but I think just to see him tell us what he's been going through heading into the season, I think was really impactful.
Yeah. I mean, when I saw the clips from the press conference on my timeline, like, I think I was like a lot of people where I was like, oh my God, like that was shocking to see. But to your point, he is, and this is who Prime is. And it's one of the reasons that some people don't like him. It's one of the reasons that everybody wants to hear from him. He is honest. He goes there and he says things that most people won't say. And I think when it comes to health, and going through something like bladder cancer, and Prime's been through a lot with his health, by the way, and just the resilience to get back at it and not let that deter him is amazing. But talking about what that diagnosis means and how that changes his life, urging people to go to the doctor, I think is a big deal. And you said it, like the Depends thing, it's like Prime will turn anything into an opportunity to make a little bit of money. But also when people are ill, there are a lot of things that happen that, there's stigma around it, right? Like your life becomes different. And then folks maybe feel like they can't do some of the things that they wanted to do, or, maybe I'm embarrassed to be in public as much as I was. And how is this going to affect my life? And so to see this dude who basically feels like he can do anything, telling you that you can do anything, is an amazing kind of way for him to process through what has happened. So hopefully this season goes well. I know there's going to be a lot on his plate, trying to make sure that he can coach a team while he's recovering from this. But my goodness, man, like Prime is one of the most interesting people in the world, and watching him again face another challenge like this, amazing.
Yeah. So we're pulling for him, rooting for him, and happy that it was something that he was able to treat and take care of when he did. So that is certainly something, another subplot, with Colorado in the spotlight that, never goes away with them. But will hopefully be in a different way and maybe less negativity, hopefully, as people understand what Coach Prime has actually been dealing with. I want to transition to talk football, since we've caught up on a lot of off the field topics. We got the USA Today Coaches Poll, the preseason poll, which means that we can talk about who's overrated, who's underrated, and just generally argue about things because we have actual numbers next to them. And we can talk about whether or not preseason polls are good or not, but they certainly give us content. Couple notable things here. So Texas is number one in the coaches poll for the very first time in preseason. It's never happened before. So it goes Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, Notre Dame, Clemson at 6, Oregon, Alabama, LSU, Miami. So that's the top 10. And, a couple notable things that jump out there. Ohio State ahead of Penn State, despite only returning 6 starters. You've got 9 of the top 25 teams from the SEC, and a full 15 out of 25 are Big Ten or SEC. So that's kind of, again, where all of this is going. Last year, there were 3 unranked teams in the preseason that made it to the playoffs. So that was Arizona State, Indiana, and SMU. So there's going to be surprises. This thing is never accurate. And there's a couple other interesting notes, like Michigan's at 14, despite the turnover there and how much they lost to the NFL draft, and probably breaking in a true freshman quarterback. You've got Boise State in there at 25, so you've got some representation outside of the Power Four. But Joshua, I want to get your thoughts just, as you look at the preseason top 25, who jumps out? Is anyone like too high, too low? Where does your mind go?
First off, I'd like to say we should stop with the preseason rankings. And this will branch out into a bigger conversation maybe you and I can have, because we've talked about the different playoff formats. But if people are advocating for a format that wants more at-large bids, and I know the committee's not supposed to be influenced by any of this, but they're humans, they are, then we should stop doing this exercise. Neither here nor there. So teams that are interesting to me, you mentioned Ohio State. I get it, but that it feels aggressive. There are going to be a lot of new things on that team, offensively, defensively. Both of the coordinators, like number 2, they're that talented. Sure. Are they going to be that good to start? Are they going to finish that good? I'm not sure quite yet. You mentioned Michigan. The Bryce Underwood thing, I think, really intrigues me because he can change their offense. The caveat is he can change their offense as much as the wide receivers allow him to. I think their tight ends are going to be good, but like their offense to me still has a little bit of a hole, even if they get better at quarterback. And then Tennessee, I feel like there's an assumption that Tennessee is like, say what you want about Nico, but they're just going to be able to kind of pick up where they left off a year ago. And I'm not necessarily sure about that.
Yeah. So they're at 18 there. And you've of course got like Texas A&M there at 21. Like this is kind of how you get to 9 SEC teams, even though Texas A&M, again, we've kind of been waiting for them to take that jump. I think all of that stuff is very valid. And I think we've talked about this, and we're going to do a full, a more deeper SEC preview before the season. Tennessee's quarterback trade, like they have the lesser of the 2 quarterbacks now. Right. So I think for as much as everyone appreciated Josh Heupel's stand and what Tennessee did, you are going to have some limitations at the quarterback position. So it is a little bit odd to kind of just pencil them in at 18. A couple things that jump out to me. Clemson at 6 feels low. Like
I agree with
seriously low. I mean, we talk about this year. One of the narratives this whole offseason has been that a lot of the blue bloods are breaking in new quarterbacks who haven't started before, right? And you see a bunch of them here, like full-time starters. Again, we still don't know who Ohio State's starting quarterback is going to be. Georgia breaking in a new quarterback. Notre Dame, new quarterback. Oregon, new quarterback. Alabama, new quarterback. Miami, new quarterback. Okay, so most of the top 10, and actually, let's count Archie Manning in there. So again, majority of the top 10. Clemson is returning the best quarterback by all the metrics. He might be the top quarterback in this draft class, but they've got dudes on the defensive line. Yes. They're returning a ton of players. This is a good team that's coming back. And we talk about retention. Like you actually know a lot of what you've got with Clemson. So I have been thinking about Texas, Penn State, and Clemson as like my top 3 in some order all offseason. So to me, I'm a little shocked that they are behind teams like Ohio State, Georgia, and Notre Dame.
I had Clemson on my list as well as an underrated team. And I think we got into this mentality of like, Dabo's cooked. Is Dabo cooked? No, he's definitely cooked. And then after last year, it was like, well, maybe he's not as cooked as we thought. And then it, like, if you really paid attention to him throughout the offseason, you mentioned Cade Klubnik and who he is, but like this is going to be their best roster that they've had in years. And frankly, to me, this is an important year for Dabo because I think their roster is not going to be nearly as good for the next couple years after this, unless they do some portaling, which they typically don't like to do. This is the opportunity for him if he wants to make another run at a title. I think this year is the opportunity where it feels like he can do that. So I'm with you. I think 6 feels a little bit low for them. The flip side, like Georgia, I think we're making a lot of assumptions. That was a team that had some challenges. You mentioned it. Got quarterback, I wouldn't say question, but Gunnar Stockton, like we don't know exactly who he is. They didn't run the football all that well a year ago. So we're just counting on them doing that to the level that they've done in the past. Like, we might have Georgia a little bit too high in the preseason.
I mean, and they were a little bit of a surprise to people that thought they were going to go get a quarterback out of the portal, right? So you had a couple different dynamics there. I think that there's a couple other ones that jump out to me. And listen, I get that some of the preseason, like I just filled out the AP preseason poll. I'm a voter this year. It's very hard. I think once you get from like 6 on, and maybe you have a sense of like, guys, teams you want to plug in there, like at the very bottom that you think like could be good, you're not sold on. But like, it's incredibly hard to say like, okay, number 10, you're talking about teams that possibly have big question marks and holes to fill. But I would say like, so Illinois at 12, I think that we both are very high on them. We think that they, could be the Indiana of this year. And maybe that's even a little bit of an insult because they're coming off a 10-win season where they beat an SEC team in a bowl game. But, there's more of a sure thing. Like there's more of, we know what's coming back with them than some of the teams that they're behind. Sure. I was someone who kind of, I have Florida higher than they are in this poll in my AP ballot. But like, that's one that like, I don't feel great about that because there are a lot of unknowns. You are kind of just betting on the potential or that DJ Lagway is going to take a big step and that they're going to play like the team that they were at the end of the year. That saved Billy Napier's job, right? So like, you're kind of, there's different picks. Like you're like, okay, I feel good about what's returning. And then there's other ones where there's a lot of questions. And you're like, all right, I just think that it's going to work out for this team. So I'll put them high because I don't know how else to fill, the 13th spot, the 14th spot. You got to put somebody there. You got to put Michigan there because if Bryce Underwood is really, really good, they will be there at some point in the season. Like that becomes very hard when you're doing it from a preseason perspective. And another thing that jumps out to me, Joshua, and I'm curious your read on this. You don't get a Big 12 team until Kansas State at 20. Then you got Iowa State right after BYU and Texas Tech, like all in that last range there. Sure. But is K-State a little bit underrated, just considering what they're bringing back and just kind of like the consistency that we've seen under Chris Kleiman?
Not really. I mean,
no?
It's the hard, no, and I'm get what you're getting at. This is the hard part for me is I think they're going to be good. I think everybody on any given weekend in that conference is susceptible, right? Like I'm looking at some of these teams where it's like, okay, can you pencil them in toward the top there for 10 wins, right? Like I never feel comfortable penciling any of those teams in for 10 wins. Like the team that wins that conference might be a 9-win regular season. So that's kind of where like I think many of the people who would vote or like voter mentality in a poll like this is, yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be good, but their record might not be great. So let me throw them in there at 20.
But I do think a 9-3 like Big 12 champ would be higher than 20.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on what it looked like for them to get to that 9-3.
True. What do you make of Texas Tech? We're later in August, we're going to preview these conferences a little deeper, but this is the team that like they spent the money. They went all in on this year's roster, checking in at 24, again, behind 3 other Big 12 teams.
Yeah, I think they're probably punching air with as much money as they spent that they didn't get a little bit more respect from the coaches poll in the preseason here. They're clearly going to be one to watch, but I think that after doing this whole buy a roster thing the last few years, a lot of us are kind of in wait and see mode, right? Like we're holding our breath to see if they have the right combination of players and personalities to be able to put together a good team. They're certainly going to be much more talented. They certainly should be in the conversation of a top 25 team, but there's always that, like, can you get it all to work after one off season that I think people are trepidatious about? That's where I'm at with them. Can you get it to work? I think they've got a really good head football coach, right? Very talented roster. Do the inputs actually go together? We don't know that yet.
That's a good point. Well, we will see. I've got 2 questions for you about the poll. There's always a team that's listed in the preseason top 10 that doesn't end the season ranked. And then there's always a team that is unranked in the preseason poll that ends up in the top 10, top 15. Like I said, 3 last year ended up in the playoff that were not in the preseason poll. So give me a team of the top 10 that you don't think is going to end the season ranked.
Well, this is a tough one because I'm not trying to wish ill on anybody. The way I saw Carson Beck look a year ago, obviously this is before injury. He looked like a man who was a little bit lost. And I hope that he's not the same way. But if he gets into that this year, that's going to be bad news for Miami. This is also a team that last year Cam Ward had to pull off a ton. That defense was not great. I know they made some changes on that side of the ball. And we've also watched them find ways to lose games in the past. Like, out of any of these teams up there in the top 10, they're the one that I feel most likely would just do bad football things to lose enough games to follow the top 25 by the end of the year.
So I'm there too, because you have to trust that there is significant defensive improvement for them to stay, kind of in the mix. I would also say, like, and I think Garrett Nussmeier is a great quarterback, but there's a lot of pressure on LSU this year. A lot of pressure on Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
We have seen them falter in their biggest games under Brian Kelly. So I don't know that they would like fall out of the top 25 entirely, but I could see them being a little bit lower than people think, which the high end of that is like SEC championship game, contending for an SEC title. I could see it being not quite that, which would be a disappointment in kind of like a national championship or bust type year for him. And he's been talking that way about this team and thinks that they have the roster that they have. I would be curious.
That's an insane way to talk, just generally. And I get why people do that.
He kept saying that at SEC. Like he said, Jaden Daniel, that team didn't have a defense that could win a national championship, but they could have if they had one that was capable. He said this year they have one, the best roster that he's had there. He's adding to the pressure.
It makes it so hard, just as a player on a week-to-week basis to just be just in the moment and to conceptualize like that. That is a difficult thing to declare. And we saw the toll it took on Ohio State last year too, by the way. Like,
so that's kind of where I am on them. It's a little bit more mental than like the way the roster looks on paper.
So let me ask
how
you
tightly
about
wound the head coaches.
Yeah. Well, he's an interesting head coach for sure.
Okay. Do you have a team that's outside of the top 25?
Well, yes, I do. But I wanted to ask you real quick because we haven't really talked about Alabama. Are they is it going to just be the return to the old Alabama? Do you think it's just that easy?
So I think they're going to be better. I think that we have not talked as much as we should have about Ryan Grubb being reunited there with Kalen DeBoer and what that's going to mean for the offense. Again, this is another one. You're going to be breaking in a new quarterback, new full-time starter. But the ups and downs that they have with Jalen Milroe, like I don't expect to see kind of the variance in performance with the well-oiled machine that is that pairing of offensive coordinator and offensive head coach. I think that they'll take a step forward. If they don't, like, that's going to be one of the stories of the season. Like North Carolina and Bill Belichick, yes, put them on the side. But if Alabama is same or worse than last year, like the pitchforks will be out. It's a place that's not used to losing that many games. And it would be hard to see Kalen DeBoer getting a third year in that situation. So I think that's one that there definitely are questions. It could go two different directions, but like I feel a lot better about like the consistency of what we're going to see offensively week to week.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were in a better spot off-season wise too, because you got to think about how Kalen DeBoer came in. Like he's trying to make sure that he can keep a roster, like first and foremost. And it makes it tough to be hard on guys during the offseason when you know that they're looking at the portal. They don't know you, like they can be gone. He lost some really good players when Saban left. But this year, right, he had that trust, he had that rapport, and it was time for him to go to work and do all the tough things they needed to do through the offseason. I think they're going to be a much tougher team from a mental standpoint this year, and that's going to matter in terms of their ability to win some games. Now, you asked about a team that's not in the top 25. That could be ranked in the top 15 by the end of the year. I don't know if their schedule necessarily sets up for it. I think this is a very interesting year for the Oklahoma Sooners. I think this is kind of a do or die year for Brett Venables. They brought in a GM kind of from the outside and was like, hey, you can have some control. And I don't know if that's we're doing this to take some off your plate or we're doing this because we don't trust you. But either way, he's going to have to go out there and make some noise. John Mateer comes in, very good player. I think their wide receiver room is going to be pretty good, and they should be better on defense this year. Not to say that they were like god awful or anything, but they should be much better on defense this year. I don't know if it's top 15, but I think that they're a team that could probably end the season ranked.
That was an interesting conversation that was being had at SEC Media Days of like, should we be talking more about Oklahoma? And I get it. It's hard to, especially in a league that looks like this, to like think about, okay, who's going to bump down or what wins you're going to take care of to get to where you need to be. But I'm with you on John Mateer. I mean, he was maybe our favorite player to watch outside of the Big Ten. And, we'd have, all the Big Ten games would be on Saturdays when we're watching at MDC. And then we pick around that. And we loved watching John Mateer. He's really, really fun. And to your point about the defense, Brent Venables is going to be very hands-on on the defense this year, right? So like, yes, make or break, he knows that, but that's his specialty. Like you hire these guys who are great coordinators to become head coaches, and then they're less hands-on because they're more CEO roles. So I'm with you. I think that Oklahoma has potential to be a lot better this year, and really kind of show that trajectory that they want when they made this hire. I'm going to say Nebraska because, and we're going to hear from Matt Rule in just a little bit because I was able to catch up with him at Big Ten Media Days, but this is a program that I buy into. I think the way that Matt Rule builds programs is sustainable. He's done it now in multiple places. We saw them take that step forward last year about getting bowl eligible, breaking that streak, and then and getting back to the postseason and what it meant. And I love the way he talked about it. Like you have to celebrate that because you have to do that before you can do all the other things that Nebraska wants to do, which is contend for Big Ten titles and national championships. And I think, you're going to see the benefits of playing a true freshman quarterback last year with Dylan Raiola. You're going to see that, yes, he had his ups and downs last year. There's incredible throws and also some mistakes, but you benefit from that year two and all of that experience in the same system with the same players around him, having gone through those growing pains. So I buy the way that they're building, even when you have some staffing turnover. You're kind of who you want to be, like your identity. I think we saw Nebraska's identity. The questions have been, can they win close games? How do you kind of like, the stuff in the margins, how do you improve there? And I think they think that they can, and that they think the players have seen the steps over the last 2 years. Matt Rule's programs have taken big jumps in year two. They've taken big jumps in year three. I think that the way the schedule falls for them, I think it's very possible that they are one of the teams that no one's really talking about right now that could certainly be there and maybe get themselves on the fringes of the CFP conversation.
Yeah, I'm very much with you. And you perfectly put the way that Matt Rule builds programs. And this is Nebraska, when he took over, was a place that needed to be built, right? Like it was not what Nebraska used to be. He's heading them in that direction, but they're going to get confident this year. Cincinnati is start. They play Akron, Houston Christian. They have Michigan. It's going to be a big game, right? But then Michigan State, Maryland, Minnesota, which no slouch. I like PJ, like what they got there. Northwestern, USC, UCLA, Penn State, Iowa. Like it's certainly not the toughest draw that you could have in the Big Ten. And I think if they start getting hot toward the middle of the year, who knows? Could they pull off an upset at Penn State? Not likely considering what Penn State has, but like it's not totally out of the cards if that's a team that gets rolling.
But if they win those other games again, like Minnesota and Iowa, right? Like those would be kind of the teams that you're trying to take that step to be on par with or above. That's a really good season. That's a fantastic season. You beat one of those two teams. You have a record that puts you in the playoff conversation as you head down the home stretch of the season in November.
No doubt.
Actually, by the way, Iowa's another team that's not ranked, that if they actually figure out the quarterback position with Mark Gronowski, maybe they're closer than people realize.
I feel like we also we do that thing where we act like Phil Parker's not sitting over there calling defensive plays still, right? Like it just feels like they'll have a resume that'll put them right on the fringe, at least by the end of the year, being a top 25 team.
Yeah, I mean they're in there too. So we'll go further into these conferences and some of the way that we see them shaking out over the next couple of weeks. We're going to kind of combine a couple leagues. We'll do the Big Ten with the ACC and Notre Dame as one preview show. We'll do the SEC, Big 12, and then the top group of 5 contenders as one preview show. As I said, we'll also get you, a lot of the interviews from Big Ten Media Days, where Joshua and I were able to sit down with a number of players and coaches